So everyone is very welcome. This workshop is one of a series associated with the British Council partnership project between ourselves here at Hertfordshire and 3 excellent institutions in Vietnam that we're really pleased to be working with. And really the whole point of this is to develop your skills, your knowledge, your understanding to rectify issues around the underrepresentation of women in leadership in Vietnam. There we go. The project is moving on at pace. We are about halfway through our project now. We've had a series of workshops that hopefully, and I recognise some of the names and faces. It is lovely to see people who've been at more than one of those workshops and indeed met us at our in-country workshops earlier on in June and July this year. We do still have more to come when it comes to thinking about mentoring and leadership and career development, but also excitingly thinking about establishing a network of female scientists as we go through the project. So really some good things. I also want to give a shout out for those of you who have been in these workshops but perhaps not signed up for the Leadership MOOC as yet. That is opening up for registrations again very soon. So if you've yet to do so, please do sign up and take a look at some of the materials there that have been co-developed between the partners on the project, because it really is a great source of information. So I'm just going to kick off with 10 minutes or so about things that are important to think about when considering developing your research bids. And as I say, some of these might be introductory if you've not done too much research yet, and some of those might be things that you want to think about in a little bit more detail as your expertise continues. So the first thing to do when you're thinking about developing a research bid is actually not to think about the research you want to do, but to look at the call for proposals in detail. And we'll take a look at that first because it's really important. It's like sitting an exam. It's really important that you answer the question that you're set. But your research idea is important, and it's really critical to the success of a bid that you have a strong idea at the heart of it, and we'll think about how you can develop that. We'll look at how you make sure that you can clearly communicate that strong idea to the people who you want to give you money to be able to make that happen, and explain your methods about how you're going to make it happen. And that you have some realistic understanding of how you will spend your research money so that you can have accurate budgeting throughout. It's really important to involve your team and your institution. And in our last research workshop, it was really interesting for us here in the UK to hear about how important it is for working with departments and hierarchy within your institutions in Vietnam to get everybody to buy into your research ideas. And then finally, we just wanted to say a little word about some things that are now coming into more and more research bids as we move through. So firstly, understanding your call for proposals. It's really critical that you take a look at the guidance notes that come with any call for proposals, because usually the funders are very clear about what their priorities are and how they are going to judge their proposals. It's really easy to get carried away thinking about the projects you want to do or the people you want to work with. But if you don't meet the criteria and the priorities that are set out by the proposer, then you won't be successful in securing your funding. It's also really important that you understand if there are any specific eligibility criteria. You don't want to get ruled out on a technicality. The images on the screen here are from the funding call for this project that supported our workshops and our proposals. And you can see there are things in there around ethics and safeguarding and making sure you're providing key milestones as you go along. We've included a couple of links for some key resources in this space. VTI UK are an excellent body in the United Kingdom who provide support to researchers and research teams, and they have a lot of open access guidance and resources that we would really recommend. And then I've included an open access paper, which is a look at how people have been successful in securing research funding and how that's recorded. I thought that might be of interest to those of you who are more established in your research careers. Having a strong research idea is something that you develop perhaps in the early stages, but it's really critical that you can communicate that clearly. So what is the start of your idea? Maybe you want to start with a problem that you want to solve, that you have a clear research question so that when you get to the end of your research, you can have a definitive answer as to whether you've achieved your aim, that clearly aligns with those priorities and eligibility criteria that come from your funders, that you build collaboration in. We think it's probably the defining characteristic of funding nowadays, that you're very unlikely to be doing work on your own. There's a lot of emphasis on collaboration. But you still have to be practical. You have to make sure that what it is that you're proposing is achievable within timeframes and budgets, and that you're really clear about what your intended outcomes are and what the impact of that will be, particularly how that connects with your funders and their interests. When it comes to clearly communicating your objectives and your methodology, these are really important because it helps the assessors of funding bids compare one application to the other. And the clearer you are, the easier you make their job. And I would always recommend the easier you make somebody who is doing an assessment's job, the more favourable the outcome is likely to be to you. So being action orientated in your intentions is really important, making sure that your objectives answer your research question and they don't feel abstract or off to one side, that you're focused, so there's a sense of prioritization so that you can keep your project within scope, and that you don't include objectives that will be difficult to measure at the end, so you're clear about what that impact is. It's also really important to think about articulating or describing your methodology well, being really clear about what the design of your research is, what data collection and data analysis you intend to do, perhaps the tools that you intend to use to do it. We've had some really interesting conversations in our steering group about the growth in use of artificial intelligence in Vietnam. But also we've been having collaborative conversations about how some funding bodies explicitly request that people do not use generative AI tools like ChatGPT in the development of their research ideas and proposals. So it's really important that you're clear about what your funding body will and will not permit. But whatever those permissions are, your methodology should be clear. You should be explaining how your methods will help you achieve your goals, because that's how your funders will decide how viable your research is. And those really small but practical details really bring a proposal to life, telling a story about the number of people that you hope to engage with, or the spread of the experimentation or the data set that you want to work with. It really brings your research ideas to life. And it's a really good opportunity to show your funders that you've considered any ethical implications that you have for your research. Some top tips in this space: avoid jargon. Now, I also agree, jargon is a word that we use here in the UK quite a lot, but that technical language that is meaningful to you in your context may not be meaningful to your funders. So try to avoid using institution-specific language and be as clear as you can. Often funding calls have word limits, but they sometimes don't around images and diagrams. Those can be really impactful in communicating timelines or ideas, and try to assume that an everyday reader could understand your funding proposal, because often research bodies will have lay assessors, particularly thinking about ethics and ethical implications or public engagement. So it's really important that an everyday reader can understand your proposal. We've got some ideas here about costs and accurate budgeting, and I make a minor apology at this point for using some quite technical language, but it's applicable to the UK, but I think the concept translates into each national setting. So we use expressions like directly and indirectly incurred costs where there might be exceptions. And you can see some definitions of those on the screen here. Again, I've included a couple of links for things that might be useful. One from the VTI site, but also we have a publication that comes out of the UK called Times Higher Education, but is really critical in global reputation. They work with the QS rankings to produce all sorts of league tables, and they have a really useful open access article around advice for funding and finding and securing funding. But the purple boxes here on the right are some basic advice, no matter what ecosystem you're working in or national orientation. You've got to be really clear why you want the money and how it connects with the activities that you want to do. Your funders are always going to be interested in a concept of value for money, the best spend that they can get for the amount of money that they're giving you. It's really important to be accurate and look at the detail of the funding call so that you're not putting in costs that are not eligible to be claimed, and that your budget matches your timeline of activities. That way they know that you've put forward a realistic research proposal and that you can work on that moving forwards. Involving your team and institution is a really important part of having a good proposal that you might submit for research funding. We're very fortunate here at the University of Hertfordshire to have a good research infrastructure. The images that you can see on the screen here are from our internal website, where there is open access information for all staff to get to when they're thinking about maybe making a bid for some grants, getting involved in an innovation project, or understanding how we have oversight of research here at our university. We recognise that that might not be the same for your own institution, or you might be interested in setting up a similar sort of structure. But even if you don't have those structures, being really clear about who's involved in the research and what roles they're going to take is critical at the start of your bid. Getting internal support for finance is really important, so that when the money comes in, you can access it and start using it quickly to get on with your work. A top piece of advice for us is around permission, letters of support, collaboration agreements. These things always take much longer than you think they will to agree them, particularly if you're working in collaboration. So it's important that your timelines are realistic in that space. And you'll hear a little bit later about international and industrial partnerships. They're incredibly rewarding, but they can be more complex to manage. So some important experiences to be shared coming up. I just want to finish on some newer aspects that we're starting to see come through in research applications. And that doesn't matter what subject area, what discipline, what funding body you're working with. And these are around things like equality, diversity, and inclusion, but also things like sustainability and signing up to responsible research covenants. So it's really critical that you think about the equality, diversity, and inclusion aspects of your project. I've got some images here to represent some of the things that you might be thinking about. So that might be, in this project, we're talking about addressing underrepresentation in women's leadership. So that was obviously a strong focus for us. But we were also keen to think about, well, how did this work for people who had caring responsibilities, who had disabilities, or people across the age spans? Many research bids now ask you to think about the sustainability of your project from an environmental perspective, but also from a geopolitical perspective. For this project that we've been working on with the British Council, it was really important to us that we worked with people both in urban and rural settings, because we recognise that the support that's available for women in rural communities to work on their leadership development was not as good as it could be. And having an open access MOOC was a really important part of our bid to say that we wanted the work to be sustainable in terms of the communities that it led. And responsible research is becoming ever more important. And I cycle back just to finish again on that point around generative AI in this space. Governance in each of the countries that release their funding is really important, and it's really critical that you take a good look at any information that is in the funding bid, for what the expectations are around complying with laws, regulations, and expectations. The good news about that is that it makes your research much more transparent and much more widely and internationally shareable once you've completed it. So all of that effort and time and maybe a little bit of pain that goes into writing research bids has great benefit at the end of it. So talking of benefits at the end of it, we're going to go in turn now to a series of speakers who are going to share their stories of securing money to work in different types of ways. We're anticipating that each of our speakers will share their story for about 10 minutes, and then we will have a few minutes to take any questions about their specific project before we turn to our next speaker. So first of all, I would like to welcome Lisa to join us. And Lisa, please just let me know when you'd like your slides moved on.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm going to share some of my experiences of securing money to do academic research work in partnership with industry. So if you could move on to the next slide. So first of all, then, obviously thinking about why do academic research in partnership at all? Well, obviously there's academic benefits, industry benefits, and mutual benefits. So from an academic side, of course, it gives you access to real world data, industrial technologies, but importantly, it gives you access to wider funding schemes, so public-private schemes such as Innovate UK, knowledge transfer or knowledge exchange partnerships, and local sort of enterprise partnerships as well. Gives you access to consultancy work, or directly co-funded industry PhDs, postdocs, etc. And of course, this is important because you then have less reliance, the university has less reliance on public QR government money, which comes from the Research Excellence Framework. Also, it enables you as an academic to deliver industry relevant teaching material, and industry academic training, for example, PhDs with industry experience. So very much a interprofessional enterprise in education and training. From an industry side, of course, it gives the industry access to industry-led, subsidised government funding schemes, allowing businesses to access academic research expertise. A knowledge transfer partnership, for example, it means that the company owns the IP. And this funding is subsidised, so industry can receive a grant up to 67%, for example, of the project costs from Innovate UK for small, medium enterprise companies, for example. So it's very cost effective to deliver a way to deliver innovative, impactful, challenging research. And then mutually, of course, there's benefits for both sides to be able to apply knowledge and expertise to commercial challenges, publish high quality journal, collaborative papers, and develop strategic relationships regionally, nationally, or internationally. So if you could move to the next slide, please, Sarah. So just to give you a bit of my research journey in terms of securing money through industry partnerships. So first of all, the first 6 years of my research career, when I obtained my PhD and postdoctoral training at 2 world leading research centres in academia. So it was very much academic research. And during that time, I really did gain a sense of that academic research in universities needed to be in partnership with research institutes. For example, my postdoc required collaboration with government-funded institutes in Cambridge. And in fact, my postdoc was funded by a company, so Park Davis Neuroscience Center, which was part of a big Warner Lambert US company, wanted to invest in the characterization of this genetically modified model I was studying. This actually proved fortuitous for me because when the government funding was withdrawn by the Research Council, the Medical Research Council, from the centre that I worked in Cambridge, I was offered a permanent research position at the company. So during that time, then I moved into industry, and the next decade I worked of my career was in industry, where I developed research leadership really focused on drug discovery, industrial research programs in neuroscience. And this led to sort of development of working on programs that developed medicines that were taken into the clinic. And during that time, I worked at Park Davis, a company called Cambridge Biotechnology Limited, and also GSK. And I was involved in co-founding a small company, CBT, and I gained a real understanding of the importance of team working, communication across big matrix organizations, and the importance of intellectual property of industrial research. And then in 2008, I joined the University of Hertfordshire as a senior lecturer in pharmacology. And my main goal there was really to bring an industry to academic research perspective to university student education, both undergraduate and postgraduate levels. But my disadvantage there when I joined the university was I'd had limited opportunity to publish in industrial research in the previous 10 years due to IP. And so this really disadvantaged me securing money from UK research councils like the MRC because I didn't have a track record. But at the same time, my advantage was I'd established an industrial working network over the decade in 3 different companies. So when I joined, I developed 2 themes of research of translational science, and yeah, I was going to talk about kind of, I wrote in terms of looking at the time, I've got two arms of research, very much research that kind of really is delivering, looking at pharmacological aspects, really delivering on clinical and societal changes. So in terms of impact. So I will then move on to the next slide. So talk a bit about how I secured this funding then. So obviously finding the right industry partner and then building on my established industry networks and shared research interests. And this was initially through short-term direct industry funded consultancy projects. And obviously I needed to develop the collaborative research proposal. So it's like, what was the mutual value for both the academic and the partners, what the deliverable were, and the IP agreements. And then I grew the network, particularly on the academic side. And what did I explore in terms of funding? I explored direct industry funding as well as public-private routes. So if you look at theme 1 of my research, I did get some early support internally from QR money and self-funded students, and some support to secure government license that I needed to offer the translational models in my laboratory. But in terms of who to work with, I'd already established those industry partners at GSK, and then some colleagues from GSK spun out a contract research company called Transformation. So having those links meant that I was attracting direct industry funding through subcontracted work. So during the first few years at the university, I basically did a number of consultancy projects, so small projects that established that link between the university and Transformation. So these were low stakes, direct industry funded projects from weeks to up to 6 months. And then moving on, during period of COVID, I exploited kind of that opportunity really by setting up a facilities contract for the company, Transformation, so that they commercially could lease some lab space at the university. And I secured a CapEx bid to double the operational space capacity of the labs to maximize that research output. So that really did solidify that link. And then I scaled up that where the company committed to a longer term project, a Hertfordshire Knowledge Exchange Partnership PhD with industry experience over a 4-year period. And then this year, I actually brought in an academic researcher from another school at the university, from a STEM base in computer science. So it was a cross-school link. Because her lab could provide expertise to resolve some of the industry challenges that the company had, like visualizing data, databasing, and using big data that they had, biological data, to train predictive models using machine learning. And that's then led to Kickstart Knowledge Transfer Partnership, some contract research, and a successful KTP bid, which we're just recruiting for at the moment. The other theme of my research, which was really about aligning locally to colleagues within my school, really a lot of that funding came between universities initially over the last few years, a few QR, and also I have a dual award with a university in Greece. But that has just recently led to working with a community interest company called the International Society for Emerging Drugs, where we've got an accelerated KTP together to solve an immediate challenge of how clinicians and policymakers are using psychedelic assisted therapies in treating addiction. So, and we plan then to apply for a full KTP. So just on the next slide, so I just got 2 more slides. Just on the next slide, I just wanted to highlight, so this KTP that we've been successful for this year with this company transformation. So this is a knowledge transfer partnership funded by the government from Innovate UK. It's subsidised funding and a 3-way collaboration between the company, the university, and we're recruiting at the moment, and the advert is on the right there, an exceptional graduate associate. And you can see here that success really of growing the academic network and establishing that link with the company. We widened the commercial value really of our research, which led to this knowledge transfer partnership to develop an innovative software tool that uses advanced machine learning to analyze facial expressions in a disease for disease diagnostics and drug efficacy. And this is in the clinical space. So it's really growing the company and the value of the company. So it's, and then finally, reflections and advice. So the key is to start with relationships, so transparency and communication to build that trust. Then to link research outcomes to business value. So commercial revenue is key. So something like a KTP project, you need to project the value for the company over 5 years and how this fits into the wider future business model. So for example, the company are now expanding into clinical trials market. Just to be aware that negotiations can take time. It can take time to set up these legal contract agreements with IP, and beware this could be complex for short-term projects. Using excellent sort of business development team support that you have within your academic institute. Start small and then scale up. So I started with small consultancies, which brought in small amounts of money, but established that relationship. Kickstart KTP then led to a full KTP, and I've got this accelerated KTP with this new community business, and then scale up to major collaborations. And finally, to really celebrate the achievements of industry, academic research. For example, a really good example is the business can employ the associates at the end of that research period. So for example, my PhD student is now working for the company in business development. So sharing those achievements, not just for the research, but from the collaboration side. So, right, thank you, everyone. I missed out a little bit because I realised it was
Lisa,
taking a bit longer.
You've got such a rich experience there, so
Thank
much
you.
to share. We really appreciate you being focused in that. I would like to invite anyone who would like to ask a specific question about what Lisa's been talking about to, if you feel comfortable to raise your hand using the buttons, the reaction buttons at the bottom, or if you'd like to pop something into the chat if you're in an environment where it's harder for you to speak. We have sort of set up today to leave some time at the end of each of the individual presentations, but I know that some people may take a while to think of their questions. So if we don't, I will just pause and let people put their hand up or pop into the chat if there is something that they would like to ask Lisa about the projects. I think one of the things that a question that always comes to me, Lisa, is knowledge transfer partnerships have been around for quite a long time in the UK, But I also think that there's something that's, I think, is relatively easy for a university to set up, just as a basic concept, isn't it? Of the idea of you have a commercial partnership project, and that can be a study-based opportunity for a postgraduate student, can't it? Sometimes
Yes. Yeah.
they are wrapped up around them getting a master's degree or more than that.
Mm.
And as you say, good opportunity afterwards. So whilst we have it as part of a scheme, do you think it would be practical for something for an institution to set that up that don't have the KTP as part of a government scheme?
Yes, yeah. So the local schemes like the Hertfordshire Knowledge Exchange Partnership Scheme is something like that, where you bring together maybe academic institutes across locally or across the UK, for example. So they form a kind of consortium, and then they invest in funding with the local. Um, uh, so, for example, the Hertfordshire
Hmm.
council partnership led to this pot of
Yeah.
money over a number of years that then academics could, if they could link up with certain industry partners, they could
Hmm.
apply for these under this scheme, this umbrella scheme. But this was really driven by the academic institutes to
Yeah.
form sort of alliances with the partners. So you had to find a partner. But
Yeah.
alternatively, there's direct industry routes where you can, with business development, you can set um, a, a project together, and then the company commits to a percentage of the funding for that, for the
Great.
fees and everything else for a PhD, for example. Yeah, so there's lots of options
Super.
there, and subsidized
Fantastic.
for the company perspective. But it's all about
Yeah.
that relationship, I think, and the project is really what, you know, what is beneficial from both sides. That
Great.
has to be really, really clear. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think one of the biggest reflections that Helen and I both had when we were fortunate enough to come and spend time with colleagues on the project earlier was that great connectivity between commerce, industry, and universities in regional areas. So hopefully that's a model that will work for
Mm.
people and they can think about using in their own practice. Thanks ever so much, Lisa. We might come back to some questions at the end. I'm
Yeah,
going to
sure.
encourage people to put them in the chat as we go along. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Maria Dimitradi, who's going to talk to us a little bit about setting up facilities using research money. So Maria, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So hello, everyone. So my name is Maria Dimitriadi, as Sarah just mentioned, and I am currently a reader in molecular genetics at a university, so in the area of biosciences. Sarah, can we have the next slide, please? So I thought it would be quite interesting just to give you a little bit of background on my educational qualifications. And this is because maybe we'll start to see synergies in relation to how I ended up working with my kind line of research, and who were my mentors across the years that helped me and support me to be able to achieve my dream, which is like my passion for my research. So now, Sarah, I guess you have to click a couple of times. So I'm originally from Greece. So I came to the UK as an international student many, many years ago. And I pursued an MSc in human molecular genetics at Imperial College. And then I moved to the University of Cambridge and did a PhD on the genetics of brain tumors. So during that time, I was particularly interested in fundamental neuroscience, and I was quite interested to find out how we can actually use model organisms to study health and disease. And that's one of the reasons why then I decided to move to America, and I accepted a postdoctoral fellowship position in Professor Anne Hart's laboratory, who is a renowned scientist in nematobiology. And I started working with her initially at Harvard Medical School and later on at Brown University. And she was an exceptional mentor. And I stayed with her for 5.5 years. So having said that, this is the time where I actually learned about C. elegans and roundworms. And I was particularly working in Anne's lab on a project on spinal muscular atrophy, which is a devastating motor neuron disease that is actually the primary genetic cause for infant death. So that time, I remember Anne said, Maria, take the project now because you've set up everything. And that's why I always say I'm really grateful for her support because not many people, PIs back in America, will do that. So then I moved from America to back to the United Kingdom because, for various reasons, but I also wanted to be back, close to my family, also in Greece, so I can travel more easily. I decided to accept a senior lecture position at that time in molecular genetics 10 years ago, September 2015. And currently, I'm at this university. I teach undergraduate and postgraduate students, and I've set up my own line of research on motor neuron diseases using the roundworm C. elegans. So for those of you who don't know what motor neuron diseases are, basically diseases that affect the neurons that are responsible for moving your muscles so that you can speak, walk, eat, and so on. So Sarah, can you go to the next slide, please? So when I came to the University of Hertfordshire, and accepted that position 10 years ago, I was pretty aware that fact that I accepted a position that was mostly teaching based. However, I really wanted to set my own research lab, but there was no funding and support, both external funding coming from me or also internal support. So at that time, I've decided to find the ways to make my dream, come true, if we call it like that. So I thought, okay, I've learned everything in being in Anne's lab. So I would like to now, since you said, you can take the project with you. So I decided to use the roundworm C. elegans to create humanized models of motor neuron diseases with a particular emphasis on spinal muscular atrophy, which is the primary genetic cause of infant death, as I said previously, because it's what I had learned all these years when I was a postdoc in America for almost, 5.5 years. So I knew in order for me to be able to pursue that, I had to apply for grants. And that's exactly what I did. So I started back in 2015. I knew from day one that in order for me to be able to set up my research, the only way to go forward was, applying for research grants. So that time, one of my great colleagues suggested, if we can have the next slide, please, Sarah, suggested and said, Maria, why don't you apply for the Seed Award in Science? It's from the Wellcome Trust, because remember, I was coming from America. I was not really aware of, the research funders in the UK. So that's exactly what they suggested me almost when I stepped my foot at the University of Hertfordshire. So I thought I'll give it a go. So the Seed Award in Science is from the Wellcome Trust, and it specifically applies to early career researchers like myself that time. So you can apply whether you're coming directly from your PhD or you have PhD and postdoctoral experience, as I had time, or you just had a big gap in research and you're just returning back. The types of researchers that this grant, specifically focuses on are basic researchers like myself, or clinical projects, or people working, for example, in public health. The funding, the maximum funding was £100,000, and that will cover your research expenses, for example, consumables, and any assistance that you are particularly interested to get, but it doesn't cover any overhead. So it doesn't give you money back to the University of Hertfordshire for this grant. But again, I had the great support from the department of the school, and I was allowed to apply for this grant. And the duration is 2 years. And, some people might think £100,000 might not be enough, but for me, it was, plenty of money, because C. elegans research is quite cheap. Like to buy a plate of roundworms, from America, it only cost me £10. So the whole idea behind this project is that we need to develop a novel idea that will go on to form part of a larger grant application to Wellcome Trust or other funding bodies. Okay, so then I stepped in. Sorry, if we can have the next slide. Sorry, the next aspect of my slide. And so what was my project? So my project, as you already know, I've been working on for 6 years on spinal muscular atrophy. My papers have just come out. So I was setting up my own profile, nationally and internationally, working on SMN using specifically the roundworm C. elegans. So I thought, my title is going to be Spinal Muscular Atrophy, Identification of Pathways Critical for SMN Function. And SMN is basically the protein that when it's being depleted, it causes the disease. So the aim of the project was to use the powerful genetic tools of C. elegans to identify novel genetic modifiers of SMA. And when we say genetic modifiers, these are basically genes that when you manipulate them, either you overexpress them or you underexpress them in your cell body, it will make things better for you. So that's, the take-home message. How can I take a C. elegans model where I, completely take out the protein that causes SMA in humans? Obviously, the worms will get really sick, but how can I make these worms look happy again? What kind of drugs can I use? What kind of genes can I manipulate to make the worm look happy again? Because there's a large degree of conservation between worms, and humans. So why was this important, specifically to look for genetic modifiers in SMA? Because at that time, it was a very, very hot topic in the field. And of course, what were my strengths here? I had my postdoctoral experience working with an expert in C. elegans nematobiology. I was the only one at that time working on SMA and using C. elegans. So I had the papers coming out. And of course, this was my strength. And let's see what I can do to move this project that I initiate in America forward in the United Kingdom. Next slide, please. So the application process was pretty straightforward. I had to submit an application online. It was a small paragraph just to summarize what my project was going to be about. So in the detailed proposal was quite short. It was only 1,400 words, and they allowed you to put only 3 figures. So I had put 2 specific aims, what I wanted to do, what kind of work was I proposing to do, and what were the expected outcomes. But also, if everything fails, what's my backup plan? Because that's really important to write on your grant applications. And eventually, there was one paragraph at the end that had to say how will this preliminary work that I'm proposing is going to, lead to a larger study where I will be pursuing more funding. Another important information for this grant, you had to submit 10 key publications. And why I'm putting an asterisk here is because I need to say that this proposal, when I had submitted back in the United States, it was not successful. But I received very, very interesting feedback from the reviewers, and then I adapted it. And for that specific application, before I submitted, one of my big papers has just come out. And I think that was really pivotal, for me getting the grant, because it hadn't been publicized yet, but I had, a copy of that showing that that's what I've achieved in America. This is a great publication. Please fund me to move forward in the United Kingdom. So also they asked for organizational support. Who's going to support me? Do I have the infrastructure, the microscopes? C. elegans research is very cheap. You don't need to buy, expensive consumables, but you need really, really good microscopes to do your research. And of course, what's the cost and justification? So I only asked £30,000 that time from consumables, and all the rest of the money was spent to employ a research assistant to help me, pursue this project for 2 years. So I submitted the application, and after 3 months, I remember opening my emails and seeing that I've been successful. And it was a great moment for me because I couldn't believe, what was happening in front of me. So the next one, please. So obviously that happened almost, 7 years ago. But what has been the impact of this award for me? Because if you remember, I had accepted a job that was very teaching oriented, and I had to be able to set up my line of research. Without getting the grant money, I wouldn't be able to do that. So first of all, when I got the SEED award in science, I had protected time for research. So I had a great line manager who said, Maria, this is great. We're going to protect you. We're going to support you to set up your line of research. There's an extra 1 day, that's, so we're not going to be giving extra, teaching, and then you can focus on that. I also became the bioscience research lead that time, trying to help other researchers that were recruiting, or try to help them, set up their own laboratories, with any advice that I can give them. And that was for me. So protecting my research time was number 1. And of course, trying to help my colleagues. For my team, I employed a research assistant. I set up a lab. I attracted postgraduate research students because I was, basically advertising myself through my lectures, with my teaching practices. And of course, I was letting everyone know, undergraduate students and postgraduate students, of what I do. So I also, because I got this grant, I managed to become part of the national and international C. elegans community. I was invited to give talks. And of course, everything, was happening, and beautiful and was laid beautiful in front of me. So I felt really, really thankful. So for UH, how does this award actually help, UH as well? So first of all, it helped me and it helped the university, showing that we've got a new line of research. I managed through that grant to secure additional internal and external funding to expand my lab, generating income for postgraduate research degrees. And I also initiate internal and external collaborations. And here you can see a couple of pictures, throughout the years from my undergraduate students, postgraduate students, and us, traveling to conferences and so on. Next slide, please. So what are my tips? I would say that do apply for grants, do set the time to do this, and make sure you've got a supporting network around you. I believe if we want to be excellent in our teaching practices, research is a very integral part of our teaching. So I've got the pleasure basically to showcase what I do in my lab and use that for my own teaching practices, both undergraduate and postgraduate level. And it's always great to see the excitement of the students when they realize that we actually have a research lab similar to this at the University of Hertfordshire, and they can always come back to me for advice. So tip number one, always ask for help and advice from the research office, because I wouldn't be here where I am today without the support of my mentors, the research office, and moving forward. So they would help me basically with the research costs, because I just told them I would like to have £30,000 on consumables, and all the rest of the money, can you please go to a research assistant? And they help me with everything on that. So that takes, the stress, when it comes to numbers and, filling out complicated Excel sheets. And then tip number two, I would say, ask your senior colleagues to read your proposals. Because this is very important, because if they can understand what you're talking about, so and that's probably going to be the take home, an exciting thing to help you improve your research grant moving forward. And just to say, never be put off if you get a negative answer. Always try to apply for grants. That's what I do, where they're going to give you feedback, because it was always the feedback that made an unsuccessful proposal that you submit in the United States into a successful proposal that helps to make my dream come true, basically, accept the position and start my research lab at the University of Hertfordshire. Having said that, I'd like to stop here and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Oh, Maria, thank you so much for sharing that very international story. Really pleasing to hear. And again, I'm going to invite anyone who would like to ask a specific question to raise their hand or to pop into the chat. But one of the things that really struck me, Maria, because I think it's relevant to this project, is the fact that you talked about, and I know that the seed money from the Wellcome Trust is a very specific funding, but it was really interesting that they talked about it being suitable for people who just finished their PhD, maybe just done a PhD and a postdoc, but importantly, people who were returning to research. And I want to relate that back to what we were talking about equality, diversity and inclusion and the nature of this project. We had lots of good conversations when we were in Vietnam with colleagues, particularly women who had taken time away from work to have their families and raise their children, and felt that would be a disadvantage in managing that and getting on with their research. And it's really great to hear stories where there is active encouragement from funding organisations to say, we recognise that people have gaps, not necessarily just for raising families. It might be that you've gone to work in industry or you've been travelling the world, but really useful to see funding organisations recognise that some people need that particular attention to say, okay, we will take a chance, we will give you some small initial idea work, and then that should then help you get your next idea. I think that's really pleasing to see.
Yes, and this is it's also for example, here at the university, one of my colleagues in bioscience, she was away for more than 5 years because she was raising both kids. So maternity leave is another important aspect as well, because women do many times will drop research and science because they need to, they want to take this step and raise a family and raise the kids and, grow their family. And what my colleague has received another grant from the Wellcome Trust supporting her to set up the research again, even though she's been away for more than 5 years. So it's great. You see more and more calls like this. So definitely don't feel like being put off the way that you've been away from science for a couple of years.
Maria, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any hands up or any comments in the chat. So maybe we'll just have a group discussion when we get to the end of our individual presentations. Thank you so much for sharing those experiences. That's really great. Talking of international partnerships and international travel, I think I just thought, yes, I did. Dr. Hwang Myung, lovely for you to join us from Sweden. Fantastic to have you with us. We appreciate that colleagues want to hear about our experiences here in the UK, but we wanted to make a really important part of this session here today to make sure that we are giving some experience of bidding for projects from a Vietnamese institution. So Nhung, let me know when you'd like the slides moved on and I will do that for you. But thank you very much for joining us. You are just still muted, Nhung, so you just need to take yourself off mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much
That's
for your
it.
introduction.
Perfect.
And I'm ready now to share my session. Yeah, can you back to the slide? Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name's Nhung and I'm from HUTECH. Actually, you are now attending the workshop belong to the project that was funded by British Council, with the PI is University of Hertfordshire and the co-PI is HUTECH. And I'm very proud that I'm a co-PI of this project. So thank you so much for Sarah and Helen, because they support me a lot when I'm writing the research proposal. And we also are very lucky because British Council choose to fund for our project. So, well, I have to say that it's not easy to secure a funding opportunity, but it's work for you to do that. And at HUTECH, we also have some process for that, how we can secure one funding opportunity. So as you can see on the slide, the first step is that I and my team, we have to scan a lot on the internet about the funding opportunity or funding call. And when we receive the information about the funding call or funding opportunity, we will, I have to think carefully about the requirement of that kind of funding and the suitable of which research team in my university that suitable with the funding call. So after that, I will send the information of the funding call to some research team at my university, and I will gather the team and I will have to discuss with them a lot about the research project idea. I have to ask them if they have any international partner or not. And after that, we finish all that discussion. We will send email to the university partner. And after that, we will write proposal and then submit proposal. So next slide, please. I will show you in detail on one case that how I succeed with this funding call. So I still remember that on this January, our team received some information relating to this call from various organizations. They have one funding opportunity for some university to join this project. So first of all, when I know about this information, and as you can see on the slide, there were two green buttons. One is more information on the SI program, another is download the full core documents. So you have to read carefully about the document to think, to imagine, and to finalize how many people you need to gather in this funding opportunity. So first I will click on the green button of more info on the SI program. So next slide, please. And then I click on this kind of button, they will show me some key highlights. And as you can see here, you can see the Vietnam in this slide. So it means that for the eligible, the Vietnam university from Vietnam have a right to submit for the research proposal. If they didn't mention Vietnam here, so it means that you don't have to care more about this funding call. So make sure that you have to check if Vietnam is show up on the eligible requirements or not. And the next they ask that who can have the right to apply. This funding said that they need one university in Belgium is a BI and another partner university from other country to the co-PI. So at that moment, I have to think carefully again about the research team of my university, who has a partner with a university in Belgium. And I found one research team that they have a partnership before with Ghent University in the past. So I sent the funding call opportunity to them, and I discussed with them a lot about the research idea. And after that, they will send the email to the Ghent University at Belgium. So next slide, please. Yes, as you can see here, this is one member of the research team, and he will send the email to the professor at Ghent University. He also include the information of the project and the project ID. As you can see on the slide, the project ID. We have to have the project ID first before we get the contact with the partner university. Yeah, because in my like experience, maybe the professor in partner university, they don't have enough time to think more about the fund. So because we are the partner with them and we want to do some research in Vietnam, so we are the one who will raise the project idea. Yeah. So what is my job next? I will follow up with the email between the research team and the professor from the Ghent University. Next slide, please. Yeah. And as you remember in my process at HUTECH, like I mentioned here, we have to think carefully about the resource, like human resources, equipment resources, and staff resources. If the resources is suitable with the research idea or not. And in this, oh no, back to the slide, please. Back. Yeah. In this email, when I follow up with the email between the research team and the professor from Ghent University, I realized that the research idea is not suitable with the situation at HUTECH. So I emailed him and said that instead of working with FEA experiments, the research idea should only focus on FEA simulation. That's a different because at HUTECH right now, we don't have enough equipment to implement FEA experiments. Yeah. So you have to think, again, you have to think carefully about the resource of your university, about the equipment, about the staff capacity, about the human resources. Yeah. And also about the money of the funding. Yeah, because if the money is too small, you don't have enough money to implement some big experiments. So next slide, please. And I'm also very lucky because the professor from Ghent University agreed with my suggestion. So we follow with the new idea. And we are also very lucky because we succeed with this fund, and the volunteers will fund for us to do this research proposal. Yeah, very lucky. Yeah, it's not easy, but I think that if you submit for around like 10 to 15 research proposal a year, maybe you can win one or two. That's all. Yeah. And next slide, please. Oh, that's also my part. Yeah. I just want to say that for securing the funding opportunity, first, you have to read carefully about the documents of the funding. You have to understand very well about the funding requirement. And you have to think carefully about the human resources, about the staff capacity, about the equipment resources at university before you discuss about research idea. And after you have the research idea, you will contact with the professor at university, at partner university. And I believe that if you can follow this kind of process, you can find the partner university that ready to submit the fund with you. So thank you. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Young, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think a couple of things that really struck me whilst you were talking was that I think it's interesting that if you want to work in partnership, understanding that one of you is going to have to do a lot of the work around crafting the idea so that you can not only convince the people with the funding to give you the money, but that you first need to convince your partners to work with you on the projects. So I thought that that was really interesting. And I think also it really showed me the importance that there seems to be in Vietnam of international collaborations for research, not just doing research within the country, that those international collaborations are really important to you.
Yeah, sure. Very sure about that, because now we follow the ranking. We want to upgrade the ranking for our university. The reason why we have to improve a lot of international relation and international project. And that also good, you know, that because nowadays when you solve any things, you need interdisciplinary knowledge from a lot of people will work together to deal one problem. And that reason why when you think about a research idea, it should be like you have to think outside of the box. You have to think that how you can combine a lot of interdisciplinary knowledge from a lot of major together in one research proposal. And that can help you to find the partner university. Yes.
That sounds great. I think the other thing that stayed with me from what you were talking about, and I hope that colleagues on the call can really connect with, is I really liked the fact that you had this internal process of a group of you who were looking for potential proposals. You know who is doing research in your institution, what everyone's specialism is, so that you can encourage people to apply for calls for money and proposals. I think that is a really important part as well, because as we discovered when Maria was sharing her story, sometimes we wouldn't necessarily think to apply for funding by ourselves, but it is an office in our university or a colleague who will say, I've seen this call for funding, you should think about applying for this. So I think you are doing some really good work for your colleagues at HUTECH. So well done to you and the team there for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And you know that at HUTECH International Project is quite new. So that reason why the staff and faculty needs a lot of encourage. So that reason why I try to talk with them a lot, and I told them that just do it. Yeah, we may fail, but we can learn something, and at least we can have contact with some university on over the world, right? Yeah, that's the first step. Yeah, that's the first role we have. Yeah.
Excellent. Is there anybody who has a question for Nhung? I'm just checking to see nothing in the chat. Any hands up? Anybody want to ask Nhung anything? Nhung, I am resisting the British urge to ask you what the weather is like in Sweden. We had a conversation about the weather in our different countries before we got here. Such a British thing to do.
Cold right now, yeah, with a lot of fog, yeah.
Yeah, not much fun, I'm sure. Nhung, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm going to move to the last one of our presenters this morning, who is my colleague Helen, who's going to talk a little bit about, perhaps we've heard three stories there, which are all related and rooted in scientific research. And we recognise that from our colleagues that we met during our in-country visits, but also from contributions in other settings that many of you don't work in those settings. So we wanted to give you some examples that sit outside of that. So Helen, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody. I think what's been really interesting listening to the examples is how much of this work is about relationships with industry partners, relationships with a previous mentor or support, relationships within a university to know which teams might be involved, relationships then with partner organisations, institutions. And this type of work, these collaborative projects we've been involved in that are not science-based but are education-based, are again all about relationships. And so we've been involved in a number of projects, very small amounts of money really, so not the sort of money that Lisa or Maria were talking about, small amounts of money shared between perhaps 7 or 8 universities, focusing on particular aspects of student experience and student outcomes. So, for example, looking at inclusive assessment design, or looking at generative AI policies and processes, or looking at the experience of students who commute to university rather than living on a campus. So different projects thinking about the experience of students. So Sarah, if you're right to move on a slide, that'd be great. So these projects are, like I say, really collaborative bids. They are groups of universities working together with a common aim or a similar challenge. And just like other folks have said, it's about identifying what that research question is or that common challenge. And it might be a problem that all of those institutions are facing or something that is a common issue for all of them. So, for example, when we talk about inclusive assessment, the project that was a collaborative project came out of all the changes we've made during COVID as we've moved all of our assessments online, and actually found that our students did better in the COVID period than previously. And so what was it about our assessments during that period that were more inclusive, that enabled students to be clearer about the assessment expectations, that enabled policies and processes associated with assessments to change? So a number of universities recognised that that was something we'd all done, and actually, why aren't we sustaining that or continuing that now that the COVID changes have ended? So that was a thought about the common or similar challenge. And we're lucky within the University of Hertfordshire, we are part of an alliance group of universities. So a group of universities that all have similar student bodies, student demographics, for example, a lot of commuting students, a lot of students from widening participation backgrounds, a lot of students who are first in their family to go to university. And our universities all have a focus on employability and applied research and applied nature of activities. So quite a few of the collaborative bids we've been involved in have been part of this alliance group. So similar universities, we work together in networks to discuss learning and teaching. And then we've seen external funding opportunities and been able to say, okay, we are similar universities, shall we apply for one of these collaborative bids? And the collaborative bids are by their nature designed to encourage universities and further education colleges to work together. So we would identify, okay, this is something that our institution is interested in. There are 6 or 7 other universities also interested in it from our wider group. Let's collaboratively put in a bid together. One of the universities takes the lead, is the principal investigator, but it's important then that there's buy-in from the other institutions. So whenever we're thinking about these collaborative bids, it's really important to identify who you're going to work with and what are the similarities between your institutions that mean that the shared results are going to be meaningful for you. Often these bids are quite short timeframes as well. So these projects perhaps last just 1 year, and there is a funding timeframe associated with it as well. So often the funding has to be spent by a UK financial year, which ends on the 31st of July. So there's often a very short time period to get the bid in, to do the work, and then to make sure the money is spent by the end of the time period. So that is a real challenge. So one of the things to think about is, can you manage the project in that funding time frame? It is going to be a short project, and there are going to be some logistical things that need to be done within that time frame. So have you got the space? Can you manage those things within a short period? Also associated with that is managing those budgets. So like I said, these grants are usually quite small grants, so up to about £25,000, £30,000 distributed between, let's say, the 7 universities. So that's not much money for each university. It's a small amount coming, but you've got to identify how you will spend it. And if you are the principal investigator, you're in charge of it, can you distribute the budget to the other institutions, and then can they spend that budget accordingly within those timeframes? So there's that logistical management of distributing and spending the budgets. Another thing to think about with these projects, because we're often working with students or student data, is what are the ethical requirements for the project. Now, we think about that within any research area, but often we might be doing student interviews or interviews with staff. So we'll need ethical approval for that process. And again, is that ethical requirement different across the different partners? So again, is the principal investigator setting up the ethical process, and then the other partners applying the same ethical process, and have their institutions got the mechanisms to approve somebody else's ethics commitment? So those are also important questions that need to be thought about before engaging in one of these collaborative bids. And the other aspect, I think, is one of the nicer things, is to really think about how the work will be evaluated and then disseminated. And again, because you're using data from each of the institutions, you might be doing some localized evaluation within your university, but then you're bringing your data together from across the 7 universities to think about how you evaluate that wider data set. That's probably why it's important to think about universities with similar student demographics or similar things, so you can pull the data together and that data becomes meaningful. And then how will you disseminate it? Will there be a process of a number of people from different universities co-presenting at conferences or events? Sarah, could you move us on to the next slide? So I just thought I'd really think about some of the benefits and the challenges. Some of them I've picked up in terms of the challenges already, but the real benefits are getting to know and working with colleagues at other universities. This really does build those relationships. It builds those networks. And again, that can lead to other opportunities, other research, other activities with colleagues that you've worked with on these collaborative projects. I think what's also really useful in this type of work is you share ideas and learn from other partner institutions, because you're working with things that are common, the assessment design or learning and teaching practices or challenges with AI policies that you're developing. You are sharing what you're doing at your institution. You're learning from what's happening at the other 7 partner institutions, and you can adapt and apply new learning into your university. You're also sharing out some of that workload. That whole of that research project is not just on you and your organisation. It is shared amongst the different areas. So, for example, in terms of output of projects, some people might be involved in the data analysis of the data across all of the institutions. Some people might be involved in the dissemination. Another 2 of the universities might actually write the paper up. So you can share out that workload, but recognising it's a collaborative endeavour. Importantly, in these projects, and most of them that we apply for have a requirement for this, but it's something we're really keen on, is to involve students in the research project. So because the money is quite small, we don't employ staff within these projects, but we may employ a student researcher or a student in a partnership role. That gives the student a great opportunity to be involved in research. It's brilliant for their employability and for their graduate outcomes at the end of their studies. But it's also really useful for us as a project teams, because the students who are the researchers are bringing their own insights, as well as then them conducting the interviews with other students or focus groups with other students. And the students in the focus groups are far more likely to share their experiences with the student researcher than they would be with a professor, for example. I mentioned that about the collaborative writing and reporting. I think that's a really nice opportunity within these areas to do that collaborative writing, to share the work, to think about different approaches, or people have different opinions within a discussion or conclusion section. It gives a richer, more interesting report at the end of it, because you've got different voices coming in. And also, you can have a big impact of this research. It has wide dissemination opportunities and is often of interest to lots of other universities because they are topics that many, many universities are grappling with at the same time. And again, we mentioned that co-presenting with collaborators at conferences and events. It really is very positive for your university. It raises the profile of your university and again supports that networking. And like I said, it can absolutely lead to further collaborations. Because of that, though, there are challenges with that. And a lot of that is the logistical aspects of it. So setting up collaborative agreements, data sharing agreements, that legal side of it is challenging. Lisa mentioned that in terms of working with industry and the intellectual property nature of that. This is similar in a slightly different nature, but you still need those legal agreements about how you will share data and how you will work collaboratively together. And that can take time. And again, in a short time frame, that can hold things up a little bit. I mentioned about the challenges of distributing the money and spending the money. Each university has its own finance department. They all work in different ways. Actually, getting the money, spending the money is really challenging. So even though it might only be, £1,500, it can be quite logistically problematic. So bearing that in mind as well. And associated with that, it's great to work with students on these projects to recruit them, and we want to pay them as their work from these projects. But again, going through a recruitment activity can take a couple of months, getting the right to work checks appropriate for the students, actually getting them on the payroll. All of those things are logistical aspects that can cause time delays. And in a short time frame, that's challenging. Similarly with the ethics approvals as well. I think the other thing to be alert to in these collaborative projects is to keep on track. Often they are, you write the bid, they're very clear about what the objective is, but sometimes we can deviate from that original plan, particularly one or more of the partners want to approach it from a different perspective, or they want to take it to the next level, and actually trying to rein ourselves back in and say, no, this was the original plan. This is what the bid was about. These are the parameters or the limitations of the bid, and to be clear, to be sticking to that. And also the reality of the hours required. There's a small amount of money. It's not going to pay for your time, but it's really important to recognise there's a lot of work involved in it. So even though you might say, we think it's probably 50 hours of work for an individual, it's almost certainly far more than that. So just being aware of the reality of the hours required. And also, again, I said about the positivity of collaborative writing, but that can also be a challenge as well. Keeping to timelines when there are multiple authors can be difficult. Other people have different pressures at different times, but also making sure we've got a consistent tone to the output or the project. And also as well, thinking then about how the work will be published after it's been finished. So the time period for the project might be 1 year, but it's quite likely things won't be published or disseminated until after that. So again, are people able to carry on that work beyond the period of the 12 months that were initially allocated? So just thinking about, again, how you maintain those relationships beyond the end of the project. I'm really alert to time, Sarah, so I will pause there and again see if there are any questions. But I'm hoping that's given a little bit of flavour of some of the thoughts about collaborative projects, particularly associated with education and student experience.
Thanks ever so much, Helen. Really appreciate you sharing those stories. I haven't seen anything in the chat, and we do have a few moments left. We are just coming towards the end of our workshop. So I am going to encourage people who would like to ask a question to feel brave enough to put their hand up or to post a comment into the chat. I just wanted to share, I've been working on a collaborative project like the one that Helen described. We weren't the lead institution, but we were the co-investigators looking at what advice students needed on generative AI whilst studying to help them with their future careers. And I just want to really reinforce what Helen said about working with students in partnership, particularly on what we might think of as scholarship projects or projects associated with improving the student experience, because why would we not want them to be part of the design and the data collection, so that we can make sure that whatever it is that we're investigating and the outcomes that we have really do reflect their needs. University of Hertfordshire has got a strong reputation within the UK for students as partners, as a concept in terms of working on our projects, and whether it's our internal learning and teaching development projects or our collaborative external projects, such as the ones that Helen's been talking about. We've had really great successes in that space. And one of the things that that's enabled us to do is react much more swiftly in these collaborative projects. So we have a number of student partnership employment roles in our university. And that's meant that when we are successful in securing collaborative money, we can bring students quickly into those projects because we've already employed them and done all of the paperwork and processes that are associated with employing students. So we can quickly use those very little pots of money that we get for that work. So a really nice thing to emphasize there. I'm not seeing any hands up or any comments in the chat. I would just like to summarize and say a big thank you to Nhung, to Helen, to Lisa, to Maria for sharing that really rich variety of stories that they have in terms of sharing their experiences of applying for research bids. As with all of these workshops, we've recorded them, and people participating in the workshops are sent the slides afterwards. So those links that we've provided to help you along the way in making successful research bids will be accessible to you. They'll be disseminated by the organising team shortly. What I really want to challenge you to do when you go away from this session today is just to take a few quiet moments to yourself and think about setting yourself a goal in relation to developing your research bids. If it's something you've never done before, you might be in a different starting place to someone who's thinking, well, I've done some work in my country. My next target is to do some international work. Or maybe actually you've been a sciences-based researcher, but you're interested in exploring your students' experience, something more on the scholarship side. So you don't have to share. We do think that's a bit of a private goal, but I would encourage each and every one of you when you go away today to sit down, take some time to think about setting yourself a goal, because once you've got something in your action plan, you're far more likely to think about getting started with that and working. Thank you very much, everybody, for being with us today. I'm just going to do one last check of the chat. It's been a real pleasure to be with you. We will be back for the next one of our workshops on, I think, the 11th of November, where Maria and Kim and other colleagues from Hertfordshire will be talking to you about mentoring and about the importance of having mentoring schemes or a good relationship with a mentor, and what difference that can make on your journey in terms of your own leadership development. So we look forward to seeing some of you again in just under a month's time. But until then, have a really enjoyable rest of the afternoon or the evening, and we'll see you again soon, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you a lot. See you guys.
See you all soon. Take care now.